For any kid who has grown up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or 2000s, Toys R Us has always been the go-to place. It wasn't just a corporate place to buy stuff, but it was a place to play. But recently though, when the 21st century hit, something happened. As we see our childhood store being demolished one by one, let's take a look back and see where it all went wrong. Charles P. Lazarus would always dream of wanting to have his own toy shop, ever since he started working at his father's bike shop. And in 1948, that dream came true as he opened his first store called Children's Supermart, and Lazarus was already successful. So before I continue on, let me explain why Toys R Us is actually successful. Because this takes place after World War II, we are in the baby boomer era. This is an era when a lot of people got back from the war and were just happy that they won, so a lot of couples began having sex. Because of this, there were tons and tons of babies being born. In fact, between 1946 and 1964, there have been over 76 million baby boomers. There are still 65 million today, which might be your grandparents. So yeah, a lot of couples just needed stuff for their babies, so they went to Lazarus's shop.
Cribs, high chairs, bathing things, strollers, dressing tables. They got in the toy business by pure accident. Somebody came in one day and said, "How about a toy for my baby?" I looked at him and said, "What do you mean a toy?" "Well, you know, something to play with in the high chair or in the playpen or in the stroller." So the first toys we sold were baby toys, all baby toys. And it's a company called Childhood Interest that made very nice baby toys that sold for $1 or 89 cents or something like that. They were moderately priced goods.
And eventually, toys overtook the baby merchandise that he was selling. By 1957, Toys R Us was finally created, with the first one being located in Rockville, Maryland. In 1966, Lazarus would sell 4 of his Toys R Us locations to Interstate Stores for $7.5 million. Interstate is a type of company that owns a bunch of smaller companies, mostly just discount stores, so this just adds to one of their stores. But Interstate was having some problems with the discount stores because they weren't doing well, and the company would enter bankruptcy in 1974. By this time, Interstate had over 51 Toys R Us's, and even with their bankruptcy would continue closing failing discount stores but also opening new Toys R Us stores. And 4 years later, a miracle happened. Interstate escaped bankruptcy, and to focus more on Toys R Us, they would change their company name to Toys R Us. Lazarus would become the CEO, and Toys R Us would take off even more when the 80s hit, hitting 101 locations. By 1981, it would make over $750 million. Toys R Us saw another possible market to dominate, which would be younger children, something that they removed. So they're bringing it back. They tried a new store idea called Kids R Us with 2 new stores in New York. That year's Toys R Us would make $1.3 billion. And between 1980 and 1985, Toys R Us sales would boom up 185%. That is a lot of percent. There were other companies that were trying to be smartasses by trying to steal that special R that Toys R Us has. Like for example, Films R Us and Tots R Us. Of course, all of them would be sued, and yeah, it must have been a very nice day for Toys R Us to know that they were saved by the hard R. By 1987, Toys R Us would make $3 billion. And as the 80s converged into the 90s, things would only get better as the company began making $5.5 billion in 1990. For a few years, Toys R Us has been expanding into other countries, and would continue to do so. Babies R Us would first be introduced in 1996. Toys R Us purchased Baby Superstore in 1997 and turned every store they owned into Babies R Us. And oh boy, that baby store, it made over $600 million that holiday season. But there was a lot of competition to be dealt with in the 90s, with the growing market of Walmart and Target, particularly Walmart though, as they noticed that the toy business was really big, and they wanted a piece of the pie. They sold toys at the time, but it wasn't really focused as much, but Walmart began investing more into getting the hottest and selling in the best toys on their shelves. And soon, other companies like Costco and Target began copying. And this caused customers to realize something, mostly parents of course, even kids. Why do I have to go to a toy store to look at toys when I could just go to the grocery store and look at the toys that are the hottest selling that I want, or that I want to buy my kids, and just do it all at once instead of having to go to Walmart, and then if the hottest toy is not there, then you have to go to Toys R Us. It just makes things so much easier. So because of this, Toys R Us began to actually lose a lot of percentage in the toy market. In 1990, it was 25%, and by 1997, it was 18%. While Walmart's share in 1990 was 9.5%, and it jumped to 16% in 1997. Also, in 1994, Charles Lazarus actually stepped down from Toys R Us because of all of this going on. And Toys R Us started a plan to restructure the company. One of the things they did was reducing inventory. They also closed 59 failing Toys R Us stores and 31 Kids R Us stores as well. When online shopping became more and more common, ToysRUs.com opened, and Walmart would become the #1 toy retailer in the US in 1999. ToysRUs.com also failed to deliver a lot of orders by the Christmas season, and that probably contributed for a lot of loss in customers and customer trust. In New York City, though, in 2001, Toys R Us would open the most popular Toys R Us that everyone knows. It's that really big one that's 110 square feet. It's 3 stories tall. It's crazy. More Kids R Us stores began being defunct as 2002 came, and by 2003, it was totally gone. And then everything went silent. Everything was sort of just chill. Toys R Us was sort of hanging in there, but by 2017, I guess they just made the decision that they just can't do this anymore. Especially because they began making less and less every year. And also because they had $4.9 billion in debt. On September 19th, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And by January of 2018, Toys R Us would close 180 stores, which made people fear even more what would happen. And it wouldn't take long when March 14th came, Toys R Us announced that they would close all of their stores in the US. And this actually really hurt the toy maker stock market. So besides the toy industry being less about Toys R Us and being more about other companies, what else hurt Toys R Us? Because there's actually more than just that. Many stores that don't really sell food are really taking a hit. And that's because you can really just buy all of this stuff online. And who could really blame anyone? There's also something else that hurt Toys R Us. Some toy makers like Mattel and Hasbro actually sold twice as much toys with Walmart than they did with Toys R Us. And Target, who has a lot more products than Toys R Us and has less toys, sold as many toys as Toys R Us did last year. Other than that, I'd have to say toys themselves. I don't really see that many people playing with toys in public. Sometimes I do, but then again, you do see little kids with technology still, kindergartners with their iPhones. And now usually this is the part where everyone goes home and I say bye, but this store is different. Out of all the things I've talked about, this is one that I have more of a connection with, more of a childhood with. That's saying that it's a store. I have a childhood connection with other companies that I've talked about, but this is one that I've been to so many times and I've grown up with. So I went to say my goodbyes to my Toys R Us, and I haven't been in one since like 2012. Wow, look at how there's barely anything. I don't know if that's because people are just buying the games off because, you know, it's closing or what, but it seems like PlayStation's the most popular. One thing that I liked about Toys R Us is that, you know, there's like a ramp here in Walmart that's, you know, not acceptable, but you could try out the stuff. I don't think I've seen many stores like that. And here was my aisle that I would always be in, all the time. So I was planning on buying something just because, but at first I didn't really know what to buy because, you know, most of the stuff wasn't in my age group, and there were barely any games. So I was like, alright, I'll just pick up a PSN card. But then I saw this, a new 3DS XL for $80. If it's not quite clear what I'm getting to, they're not $80, not even at Walmart. Not on eBay either. So I was like, holy shit, this is a good deal. And surprise, surprise, it was sold out. Somehow I was talked into getting a 2DS XL, I don't know how. Oh yeah, and the dude next to me spent like $400, literally. Not on video games and expensive shit like that, but literally like toys are like $10 and $20. That's crazy. Toys R Us will always be remembered by both baby boomers and even millennials, because that actually hasn't ended yet. It was a place where we would purchase our Legos and video games and Barbies. There was just something uplifting about going into there. But that's business. Business is not pretty. It's survival of the fittest. Everything's going digital, and this is just one sign. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.